Will the adopted home state of Wacky Walls be the upset of the presidential cycle and go for the Trump-Vance ticket? And how so? Proud populist author Troy Olson is an Army veteran and the co-author of the Emerging Populist Majority. He joins us now. Troy, how are the numbers that narrow? 2%?
Minnesota doesn't track by party registration in their voter registration data, so it's a little bit tougher to ascertain what's going on with the early vote. But I would actually look elsewhere on all of that early data. If you're writing the script for a Trump surprise victory, you want to see 50 to 1,000 K turning out, and I see a lot of them in the early vote. I see a lot of families in that early vote, and I also see a lot of unknown in there. And I have some theories on where that unknown is coming from. The third and final thing I liked is that the rule vote is actually not accounted for that much in the early vote, which means that there's going to be an election day or potentially an election day boost there.
If I understand this correctly, 25 million, there's some kind of number here about the early voting track record for Minnesotans. Is Minnesota known for its early voting activity, or, how has it changed over the years?
Yeah, it's one of the states that did early voting. There's a handful of states like this prior to COVID, and COVID, of course, everyone did it. So it's notable that Republicans are competitive in the early vote, because historically early voting has been, Democrats chase the low propensity voters. They chase voters they're worried about for election day and bank that vote. And so the fact that the Republicans are in the ball game is huge.
What about, I'm also reading, when it comes to Minnesota, you have some rather interesting demographics. You got the Native American reservations that are based in rural Minnesota, which I did not know. I didn't realize there was such a population. But there's that voting demographic. There's also Amish. Amish voters have recently splashed across headlines this cycle, in Pennsylvania in particular. Are they going to be pretty active in Minnesota, or is that insignificant? What's the numbers there?
So I think it's possible that you see one nationally that Trump wins the Native American vote, and he basically won it in certain states in 2020. And then the Amish vote, it's not as much as Pennsylvania or even upstate New York in Minnesota, but I do think it accounts for a couple of thousand that have never turned out to vote before. And if you're scripting a surprise victory, I think all of these things are materializing.
Interesting. So talk to me about the Native American vote. I know you're not an expert in that, but again, I'm fascinated by that in association with Minnesota, because again, you don't really associate that with that state. So what is it about Kamala Harris do you think that they're not resonating with?
I think the vote has had a bit of a transactional history, and quite frankly, if you look at the economy you had under Donald Trump versus the economy of the last 4 years, I think they're looking at it that way. There actually is a Republican connection to the Native American vote going back to Calvin Coolidge. Maybe it's a bit of a resurrection of that. But in Minnesota specifically, if you look at Monoman, where Monoman's at, which is in northern Minnesota, we're not talking about a huge county. It's 5 to 10,000. But what we do see there is close margins, competitive margins from 2020. So if you see that go firmly for Donald Trump to resemble more of the rule vote generally, that's another recipe for disaster for the Democrats.
Interesting. All right. So here's another story I wanted to ask you about. So it relates to what we're talking about. Mark Halperin, the journalist, has said that early vote looks very good for Republicans. And there's some belief that if the Republicans keep these early voting numbers high, the Democrats are not going to be able to overcome the numbers on Election Day. And this goes to this line that people have been saying, they have to make it too big to rig.
For all our viewers asking where One America News is heading in the future, we would like to introduce you to OAN Live. OAN Live is the best way to stay up to date on all of the hard-hitting, straight-shooting, national and international headlines. And the best part is, OAN Live is only $4.99 per month. All the credible, honest, unbiased reporting One America News offers at a fraction of the cost of cable. Just go to OANN.com to easily sign up for OAN Live and stay informed.